Hello, everyone. For Telestar, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. Thanks for joining us. To begin, new evidence about the plans of Venezuela's right-wing opposition has been made public. The president of the National Assembly here, Diosdado Cabello, released a recording of a telephone conversation between the president of Empresas Polar, Lorenzo Mendoza, and the Venezuelan economist, Ricardo Ausman. Now, in the conversation, both speak about the need for a fiscal adjustment plan for Venezuela that would be driven by a loan from the IMF and the World Bank. Empresas Polar is a food manufacturer and the largest private company here in Venezuela. Ausman is the director of the Harvard University Center for International Development. He was also planning minister under the government of Carlos Andrés Pérez in the early 1990s. In the recording, Ausman is heard saying that he has been in conversations with the IMF. He adds that, quote, the vice president for the Western Hemisphere is a good friend and he is very worried about Venezuela, end quote. Also in Venezuela, President Nicolás Maduro has announced that a diplomatic roadmap to resolve the Essequibo territorial dispute with neighboring Guyana will be outlined in November. Now, his announcement came after the arrival of a UN commission to evaluate the situation and to design a new path to peaceful solution. A second round of talks on the Essequibo region will be held next month. Maduro took the opportunity to explain the details of Venezuela's claim to the disputed territory to the UN delegation.
I see tangible results, and little by little, we have achieved to dissipate the threats and risks, which are numerous and dangerous. We denounced a few of we knew of the other issues, and we dealt with them as a continued consolidation of a region, and Venezuela has gone around the world with the truth.
In the maritime dispute between Bolivia and Chile, the Chilean foreign minister has announced a new, more active communication strategy in which historical arguments will gain relevance. A historian, a political columnist, and a political scientist will join Chile's team at the International Court of Justice at The Hague. On the other hand, Bolivian President Evo Morales described as a hoax Chile's several offerings. He added that Chile has hurt its reputation by attempting to blackmail Peru and Paraguay into supporting Chile in the dispute. He also said that Chile has attempted to threaten Venezuela, Ecuador, and Cuba to turn their back on Bolivia.
We are not in a time of blackmail or restrictions. We are in a time of solidarity and working together. The blackmail against Peru has failed. Against Paraguay has failed. Chile, because it can sell its image to the world, saying that we invaded, and with the treaty unresolved, how can Chile say at this at that time? They don't have any argument. Bolivia is around the world.
We need to reinforce the deployment of parliamentarians, former presidents, to go where it's necessary to present our position in order to depreciate the distortions of the Bolivian communicational campaign.
Morales argues that this dispute has been triggered by the oligarchy and not by the people.
I'm convinced this is not a problem of the people of Chile or Bolivia, but one of the oligarchies, the English transnationals, who to the economic reasons have invaded us. They will say there was no invasion and we solved with this with the treaty. But why then don't they review the 1866 treaty, which recognizes access to the sea? The second one is from 1874, but the one that has been imposed by threat is that of 1904. An imposed treaty that has not even been fulfilled.
And in Chile, university students took to the streets again this Thursday to demand progress in the talks about free higher education with the ministry. The students want the government to understand that its proposals do not seek a profound transformation of the whole system. On Wednesday, the Students' Federation pronounced that the last meeting with the government had not taken place, which they believe means there is no willingness to end the process. After the closing of the Banco Continental in Honduras, the authorities there have confiscated 19 businesses and various properties belonging to that group. Grupo Continental belongs to prominent Honduran banker Jaime Rosenthal and his son Yanni. A U.S. court charged both of them and another relative with money laundering. The U.S. Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control froze last week their U.S. assets and 7 of their businesses, which had been classified as specially designated narcotics traffickers. Honduran regulator began to return money on Wednesday to the bank's more than 220,000 depositors.
The Honduran government, without any investigation and following orders of the United States Treasury Department, closed the Continental Group and the Bank of the Rosenthal family that are currently under accusations by the United States of money laundering the profits of drug money. This corporation is one of the country's biggest economic powers.
It worries me a lot that such an economic conglomerate, one of the few financial associates that are registered in the Bank and Insurance Commission, with a holding of many companies in different sectors and in the economy, is being forced into liquidation. We are talking about a group that on its own produces 5% of the gross domestic product of the country. We are talking of 20,000 million lempiras, $1 billion from the different companies.
The United States government captured businessman Yankee Rosenthal last Thursday and extended detention orders to Jaime and Yanni Rosenthal, the leaders of the family. There has been no information on the charges, and the Honduran government has proceeded with a never-before-seen diligence to close the Continental Bank and Group. This Thursday, 4 other national banks began to give back the money to clients of up to $10,000. Accounts with higher amounts will have to wait.
Well, thank God we are out of this uncertainty. Since last Wednesday, the Bank and Insurance Commission has proved they are not serious. In less than 48 hours, they changed their version first. They said they even threw the accusation the bank was solid. And then they make a forced liquidation, and they do it in a national holiday when all banks are closed. You couldn't take out your money. They don't seem to care on how hard it is to have savings in this country.
Occidente and Ficosa are 2 of the Honduran national banks that will return the savings of more than 210,000 clients of the now closed Continental Bank, property of the Rosenthal family, that are under accusations by the United States Treasury Department for supposedly money laundering of drug trafficking activities. Gerardo Torres, Telesur, Central America.
A massive manhunt is underway in Mexico's northern states of Sinaloa and Durango. Military forces are searching for the world's most powerful drug lord, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, in a mountainous region that is said to be the drug kingpin's stronghold. Now, sources have told Telesur that since his escape on July 11th, El Chapo was in that mountainous region he controls and where he enjoys the protection of federal and state security forces and officials. The news comes as a Mexican senator accused the federal government of lying to cover up the real facts behind Guzman's jailbreak. As the Mexican government comes under strong criticism, lawmakers and the current administration of President Enrique Peña Nieto are moving to adopt measures and laws to quell the country's human rights crisis, specifically in regards to forced disappearances. Yet the families of victims express their frustration and hesitation that these measures will actually be effective. Our correspondent Clayton Kahn now with more.
October 20th will mark 5 years since Maria Padilla saw her son Cristian. He vanished in the conflictive state of Veracruz with strong evidence pointing to municipal police as the culprits. Maria's of the families of the estimated 26,000 disappeared in Mexico.
They didn't rob me, my dog. They robbed me, my son. The state robbed me, my son.
Demanding a thorough and transparent investigation, Maria says the authorities have done little to attend to her case, investigate the suspects, search for her son, or provide any kind of aid or assistance.
But the state owes me my son, and I cannot work. The state needs to provide me with the psychological and psychiatric attention as well as provide the medicines.
In the wake of the high-profile case of the forced disappearance of the 43 Ayotzinapa students, international rights organizations have grilled Mexico for not adequately guaranteeing human rights. The common opinion is that Mexico suffers a systemic human rights crisis.
In particular, it highlights the prevalence of impunity and the disregard for victims that affect the entire country.
Yet, in response to the mounting national and international pressure, Mexican authorities announced the formation of a new public prosecutor's office in charge of locating the disappeared.
This unit will be competent to direct, coordinate, and supervise search investigations and the location of disappeared persons.
However, the legal representation of Maria Padilla criticizes the government announcement, arguing that it is not new and that the problem and its resolution are much deeper.
But it is not creating institutions that later turn out to be white elephants or produce new laws, but rather it is a structural problem that needs to be tackled at the root.
While lawmakers are debating the approval of a new national bill that will formally criticize forced disappearances, rights defenders say the political will to act and apply the measure, as well as tackle impunity, will be key in resolving Mexico's human rights crisis. Clayton Cantelo Sur, Mexico City.
The expected trial for the massacre of Curuguati in Paraguay has been delayed one more time. The defense has recused the tribunal for the 10th time for its supposed sympathy with the farm Campo Moroví, where the killing of 11 campesinos and 6 police officers took place on June 2012. They also demanded the court to lift the cautionary measures on the accused. In May of 2012, the farm Campo Moroví was occupied by 100 farmers protesting the shortage of agricultural land. The Ministry of Interior ordered their forced eviction 3 weeks later, which led to violent clashes. Then President Fernando Lugo suffered a political trial and was dismissed. Colombia is having regional and local elections this Sunday in its capital. One of the main challenges there will be for the candidates they will have to face will be its chaotic transportation. Now, Bogota is one of the most densely populated cities in the world with a population of 8 million people. The public bus system called Transmilenio is used by almost 300,000 commuters during rush hour every single day. Plans for a subway have been repeatedly shelved.
In the 80s, when the discussion about the subway started in Bogota, the president decided to build a subway in Medellin. After, in the 90s, there were problems with the war against drug trafficking that reduced the nation's resources. And in 2000s, because of local initiatives, the nation decided to invest in buses rather than subways.
And of course, Argentina will hold presidential elections on Sunday. The candidate for the Front for Victory, Daniel Scioli, thanked current President Cristina Fernandez for her support.
Thanks a lot, President Kirchner. Your politics have helped the Buenos Aires province to multiply by 3 the amount of industrial parks and to have professional schools in each of them. A delegation of the provincial bank. That's the next chapter, which is coming to Escobar in the province, and at the national level, the agenda of Argentine development. That's a real useful vote in favor of the country, not against anyone, but in favor of everyone's victory.
In Peru now, representatives of the Social Society along with congresspersons rejected the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, recently reached between Peru and other 11 countries, including the United States, Mexico, Singapore, and Japan. The signatories accused the government of President Ollanta Humala of treasoning its people by limiting its citizens' access to medicines.
The government has put in serious and grave risk the access to medicines for Peruvians. It has not kept its word, because in all times that the Congress has discussed the subject, we were told it would not go further. The government has not kept its word.
We were told that for biological medicines, the patent's protection will be 0, and practically we're accepting 8 years. This is a treason to the citizens and to the Peruvian people that must be reported.
And Peruvian authorities also burnt over 2 tons of drugs in a public burning. It is the 6th major drug burn of the year. The stash was made up mostly of cocaine and some marijuana. Now, according to the UN and the U.S. government, Peru is currently the world's top cocaine producer. The Commander-in-Chief of the United States, the President, has decided to keep troops in Afghanistan. Find out more details on why and what other country U.S. troops have been deployed to when we come back.
Are there at the invitation of the government of Cameroon?
The truth behind the power. We lift the lid on some of the world's most ruthless figures. Open file. Only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there. An insight into Africa today. With Bill Fletcher. The Global African. Only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there. We need to understand the world we live in. We require news with critical points of view, thorough analysis, and social commitment. This information is vital to think, to understand, and to change. The world demands a new perspective. telesurtv.net/English. Wherever the news, you'll be there.
The Obama administration has announced that the United States will slow down Obama's promise of removing all soldiers deployed in Afghanistan by the end of his term. Now, Obama had aimed to steadily withdraw the current 9,800 U.S. troops and leave only a small U.S. embassy-based force in the capital there of Kabul before he left office in January of 2017. Under the new plan, the present force will remain throughout most of next year and will be decreased to 5,500 starting sometime in 2017. It is at least the second time that the U.S. has revised its exit strategy of Afghanistan. The U.S. also announced the deployment of troops to Cameroon to assist the country in their fight against the Boko Haram group. However, according to the White House, they will not engage in combat operations.
The U.S. military forces who were deployed to Cameroon are there at the invitation of the government of Cameroon and will act in coordination with the government of Cameroon. The United States military forces will partner with Cameroon's Ministry of Defense, and it will be part of a broader regional effort to stop the spread of Boko Haram and other violent extremist organizations in West Africa.
Iran says it would consider sending troops to aid Syria if they were requested to do so. Now, this according to a senior Iranian official during a visit to the war-torn country. However, according to Syrian military sources, thousands of troops from Iran have already started arriving there via an airport in the Latakia province. Syria has launched a major offensive just north of the strategic city of Homs. Iran has been a key ally of President Bashar al-Assad's regime and has stood by him throughout the protests against his government, which began in March of 2011. As the Syrian government forces further their advances with the aerial support of Russia on territories controlled by the Islamic State group or Daesh, the U.S. has rejected talks to discuss a political settlement in the Arab country. Russian President Vladimir Putin criticized Washington's rejection to the dialogue and described it as weakness on the part of the United States due to a lack of clear objectives. Since Russia began airstrikes in Syria, dozens of vital Daesh targets have been destroyed, diminishing the power of the militant group. British Prime Minister David Cameron has met with the President of the EU Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, in Brussels ahead of the two-day summit of EU leaders. Speaking to reporters earlier, Cameron revealed that he will present his demands at the start of November to the European Union. EU officials and diplomats have voiced their impatience since Cameron confirmed a referendum on EU membership after his re-election in May. On Wednesday, Juncker pledged to work for fair new membership terms, but Britain warned Cameron to also respect Europe's interests. The British government has denied safe passage for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, who is suffering profound pain in his right shoulder. Assange has been told by doctors he urgently needs to have an MRI scan to determine the causes of his 3-month-old condition. The UK suggested the activist would be detained as soon as he left the embassy in London. They also threatened to reconsider future cooperation with Ecuador. Ecuadorian Foreign Minister Ricardo Patiño condemned London for what he said amounts to a violation of human rights.
We also understand the reasons they might have as a government. But of course, even in times of war, in other types of conflicts, for humanitarian reasons, safe passage is granted. We, in this case, have requested Mr. Assange be able to undergo this medical exam. However, the answer is always the same. When he leaves, we will take him prisoner because we have to follow this European detention order.
For a second week in a row, Kosovo's opposition disrupted parliament with tear gas in protests at agreements made with Serbia. They were able to pull it off despite tight security at the entrance implemented to prevent a repeat. The protesting MPs are upset about EU-brokered agreements with Serbia that included a plan to set up an association of Serb-run municipalities. This will give greater autonomy to Kosovo's Serb minority. After more than 2 years of negotiations, Myanmar's government has signed a ceasefire agreement with 8 armed ethnic minority rebel groups. However, the move was weakened as several other armed groups refused to join in on that deal. The signing ceremony was televised and was attended by the army chief and rebel representatives in ethnic dresses. The deal is viewed as a first step towards ending 6 decades of fighting between the government and various minority ethnic groups who are demanding autonomy and control over their natural resources. In the United States now, Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump held a rally in Richmond, Virginia, my home state there, where at least a dozen students tried to interrupt his speech. Supporters of the billionaire started shoving the protesters from Virginia Commonwealth University and snatched their signs. The students said their aim was to call Trump out on racial and immigration issues. South African Oscar Pistorius, incarcerated for killing his girlfriend on Valentine's Day 2013, will leave prison on the 20th of this October. The African Paralympic athlete will be sent to house arrest and will not have to wear an electronic tag device. Now he'll have to continue with his therapy and will not be allowed to handle firearms. This was decided this Thursday by a parole board at the prison, where he has served 10 months of his 5-year sentence after an initial ruling in the same direction was canceled last minute in August. Pistorius was convicted for homicide but acquitted of murder last year, but prosecutors appealed. The new hearing is due on November 3rd, 2 weeks after his releasing. If convicted, he faces prison for 15 years. Brazil has launched the official products for the 2016 Olympics. Some of the merchandise that carry the official seal include pet toys and souvenirs. One souvenir store owner said he was very satisfied with the products that were licensed by the Olympics team, and he was confident that they will do well. A new museum has opened in Santiago, Chile, dedicated to Violeta Parra, who is one of Latin America's most renowned songwriters. The museum aims to shed light on the songwriter's art, especially her embroidery, as well as her music. The museum is now open thanks to Parra's son and daughter, who wanted people to connect with their mother's work outside of music. They wanted to showcase her creativity in all of its dimensions. That's what we're covering on this Thursday afternoon here from Caracas. Plenty more on all of those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great day.